My advocacy revolves around participatory governance in almost everything that involves a good quality of life. Participatory governance entails broad involvement. It entails accessible information, transparency, accountability, and that leads to trust in decision making. I'm a lifelong student of governance. I've studied it in families, teams, communities, organizations, healthcare, research, and various other settings. Welcome to Health Hats, the podcast. I'm Danny Van Leeuwen, a two-legged, cisgender, old white man of privilege who knows a little bit about a lot of healthcare and a lot about very little. You'll listen and learn about what it takes to adjust to life's realities in the awesome circus of healthcare. Let's make some sense of all of this. Thank you. I was first conscious of my interest in governance in 1968. I was 16 years old and I was worried about the draft, the Vietnam War. I didn't really have to worry about it till I was 18, but I'm always a let's be prepared kind of guy. And so I went to a church, local church in Detroit that had draft counseling on Sunday nights. And I went to have draft counseling. I was clearly the youngest person there. And the person that counseled me suggested that I become a counselor. Whoa, what an idea. And so I did. I took the course of counseling. I learned the plumbing of the draft, which includes laws, regulations, unspoken customs, and people making decisions, people moving paper, massive numbers of kids like me or really older than me processing through that system. So I became a draft counselor, and I was still in high school. And then I went to college, and I lived in several group homes, and we had to decide, how are the chores going to get done? Who was cooking? Who was shopping? How are the bills going to get paid? What kind of behavior was okay? And at university, there were rallies. And I wanted to know, how are these rallies organized? And I was very fortunate in that I became friends with several of my professors. And I can think of two people in particular, Barbara Polk and Peggy Keeney, who took me with them to meetings where the politics and the activism and the rallies were discussed and planned, and they pointed out who was who and how were decision made, and I just thought that was pretty interesting. And then, when I got married and my wife and I decided to homeschool, we tried to do a participatory democracy, making sure that our kids were involved from a young age in the decisions of the household, including chores and, who was cooking and doing the laundry, and we homeschooled. And so living together closely and going to school together, we got involved in the state laws about homeschooling, and we went to lobby in Charleston, West Virginia, and we went to Washington, and we learned quite a bit. And when we lived in West Virginia, we were part of an intentional community. So it was a group of people that owned 160 acres, 4 families, and they invited us to come join them. And we did. But they didn't really have a system of governance, and we were quite uncomfortable with that. And so we guided our community members to develop bylaws and, to form a corporation to own the land, to have a board of directors, have the bylaws. How did people enter the organization? How did people leave the organization? How were bills paid? Who owned what? What did land mean? We built a house? What did it mean building a house? We set it up that we didn't own our houses. We leased our houses, that the corporation owned everything. So since then, I became a clinician leader, a manager of, an ICU, a manager of information technology. And I learned how corporations were run. And I participated in several boards, and I led a board. And I would have to say it was mostly pretty underwhelming. Now, the best boards I've seen in my 60 years is the World Health Network, PCORI, and the COVID pod created by several family friends. So this episode is going to be about that pod and governance. I spoke with Bevin Croft and David Weintraub, who represent 4 couples with pre- and primary school children who formed a pod to manage their children's education, and they were neighbors in a community, and they managed their lives together while remaining safe. I've known Bevin since 2007. We're fast friends. I officiated at her wedding. And, let's start with hearing from Bevin and David.
Jeff goes to you. What do you got, Jasper?
Have you ever seen a goose kiss his roots?
Yeah.
We looked younger.
Who did?
Us. Like they just showed Jeffy.
Yeah, that's 5
They
years
just
ago.
showed. I just yeah.
Jasper still is 10.
Have you ever seen a ghoul going to school?
Cute.
We were already potted up then because we're not wearing masks.
Yeah.
So did you make
Look at
Oh, I know. It was bad. That's ridiculous. But I had no reason to shave my beard.
No. Yeah, Dave also has a big beard.
Yeah.
So did when did you give what you were doing a name?
We used the name Pod, and that was already in the consciousness, in the
Yeah.
on the internet as a thing that people
Right.
were doing. They were creating pods.
Right. And
Right.
so when's the first time you did that about
Yeah.
yourself?
We broke the seal. We had been talking about it, and we were all hanging out outside with the kids, which we had been doing really regularly. And it was in May. I don't remember what day. And we were just like, fuck it.
Yeah, we're like, this is
We're gonna do
stupid.
it.
This is dumb. Like, why don't we just hang out?
We really want to hang out.
Yeah.
Let's just hang out. And then we just
Yeah.
started hanging out, and we never stopped.
But there were some slight complications because the Zoans moved to Hawaii.
Yeah.
and I think they moved in mid-April. I think they moved like
Yeah.
April 15th or something, and they went for 6 months, April 15th to like October 15th.
So it was and it was our like very close, tight knit group of 19 people, 5 families. It was 4 of the 5 families that decided to do this. The
3.
5th. Well, no, it was
The Shulams were not part of it.
I know.
Yeah.
The Zoans were before they
That's right.
moved.
Yeah.
So when we were like, screw it, we want to hang out, it was these 4 families. The 5th family had kind of another family that they had already potted. They kind of potted with another family that they were sharing some childcare arrangements with or something.
Yeah.
And Betty and Allie. So they didn't pod with us. So it was the 4 families. And it happened in
I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was
May.
I'm pretty sure
No,
that
but
the
the Zoans
Zoans
were
were gone. I'm pretty sure they left on the 15th. I don't know how I remember that, but I do.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it was at least these 3 families, and then there was a couple of the other close families went in and out. We sort of just like started hanging out together.
Right.
And it became evident very quickly that we also had to like make some rules, because back then it was like, well, if you are hanging out with us and you're also hanging out with your parents, then what if we get each other sick and then we bring it to a parent, and then that parent gets sick and dies, and then we live with the guilt that we were messy, right? Those were the kind of stakes and the kinds of conversations we were having to have. So effectively, we didn't spend time with our parents.
Correct.
And hung out with each other instead.
If you want more, let me know.
Sure. And one of the calculations was that like that for day-to-day sanity and for closeness, and this is true like in general, I think for people, your friends are kind of like the most important. Not for everybody, but for us and for a lot of people in our stage of life.
Yeah.
Having close friends with other kids the same age as your kids, that was more essential to us socially.
It was also it was hard. It was really hard for me because I had like my sister lives actually in Arlington, and she has 2 boys, and I think she was excuse me. I think she was upset that we couldn't see them outside of like very like outdoor. We like would go bike riding in a parking lot, whatever, to see each other, but like we couldn't hug or we couldn't be in close contact. We couldn't be indoors, and that wore on them and it wore on us a lot. And so that was really hard. But Bevin is right. Like we made that choice because Jasper and Ivy live essentially five doors down.
Right.
And it just made more sense to have close, like literally close and emotionally close connection be the main connection at that point. But it was hard. I had a lot of tense conversations and non-conversations with my family members about that. And nothing was ever said that was like mean or vindictive, but I think everybody felt the tension. Like I felt it, Jesse felt it, my sister felt it, her kids felt it, our kids felt it. So that was really, really hard. But at the same time, I think that having that pod was really, really necessary at that point.
Yeah. Wow. So, tell me about you just told me about a particular challenge with it. What was challenging for you?
About our arrangements?
Yeah.
I loved it. We didn't, I didn't, have anything. It was very clear to us that we wanted to be spending time with these people and that was priority. Everything else about the pandemic was challenging, but the actual pod arrangements themselves, the challenge was like negotiating everyone's needs. Um, you know, and but I think and I'm sure it was challenging.
And needs meaning alone time, quibbles.
No,
What's
it was really
needs?
it was the rules. It was knowing what the rules are.
Well, you should tell about the contract.
Yeah, so it basically became clear really, really quickly that there was no way that we could, that I don't know the details, but I'm sure that it was 4 families at this time.
Yeah, because we were at the zone.
We were 4 families.
And you couldn't wing it.
We couldn't wing it. We couldn't be like, oh, we'll find out. It was like, no, it felt life or death, right? No, we cannot infect the grandparents. Like, no, you can't just go and hang out with this other family on the weekend because the stakes back then, before vaccines, when we didn't know the extent, was that somebody could get sick and die, right? So the stakes were very, very high. We had to all be on exactly the same page about our commitment to this pod arrangement. So I brought out some tools from work. So at work at that time, I run a national technical assistance center for state governments that support people with disabilities called the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems. And it's essentially a technical assistance center that's funded by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the Administration for Community Living, so HHS, that is there to support states to comply with requirements for making good, strengths-based, life-affirming, inclusive service plans for people with disabilities. And there's all kinds of tools that have come out of that movement. Started as kind of a disability movement and then became adopted by the federal government. But there's all these tools for families, chosen families, circles of support to negotiate what a good life is like for a family member with a disability. So we basically took some of those tools and modified them to negotiate what our life as a pod needed to be like. And there were all kinds of tools that came in handy, how do we balance quality of life with health and safety? And how do we balance multiple people's priorities and needs? So we went through this, we spent a couple hours one day together, all 8 of the adults while the kids played, and mapped out on a big sheet of paper how do we hope to be together? What is the ideal way we can spend the next, ride out COVID together as a community? What are the ways that this could go bad? What are the ways that this could go wrong? What are the things that we need to do and agree to that will lead to the ideal state? And then what are the things we need to not do that will result in the undesired state? And we mapped it all out. And we came up with an agreement together. And we wrote it down and we abided by it. And really, truly, it worked beautifully.
Yeah, and so how many items are on it?
I don't remember. There were 20. I added it between
it's a
things
quadrant.
to do and things not to do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They were and it got super concrete and specific. It wasn't be nice to each other. It was we all agree that if somebody's uncomfortable with something or scared about something, you have to tell other people. It's your responsibility to tell other people.
Yeah.
We all agree that we will, whoever is least comfortable, whoever is most nervous about something, will listen to that person. So it's not going to be oh, Erin is worried about us going to the movies, but the rest of us want to go to the movies. And we're going to go to the movies. It was nope. In that situation, Erin is still worried about the movies, so we're not going to go to the movies. We have to all agree that it's cool to go to the movies before we go to the movies.
Yeah.
So we made decisions like that. We made decisions can't hang out with the grandparents. Or if you hang out with the grandparents, then you have to step away from the pod for a week, like whatever.
Yeah,
like
stuff like that.
CDC guideline informed.
Sure.
Yes, we just wrote it all down. It went in writing, and we abided by it for months.
Yeah. I think that we all took it seriously because it mattered that we had the support network. And I think that, I don't know if we ever got sappy about it, but I think that we abided by it because it was really important to us to have our friends be a physical part of our life.
We started the conversation with why does it matter? Why does being together matter? Like, why does being in this community with each other matter? There's no way we could have done it if we hadn't already been friends.
Yeah, it's true.
The pod story is about people just like podding up, like
With randos.
out of convenience.
Yeah.
Like,
Why haven't there been more movies about that? Probably because people want to forget.
our kids will make them.
Yeah.
How are you different because you experienced that?
For me, I think it was a pretty healing and powerful experience. I came from a pretty chaotic family life with a pretty disjointed family, not a lot of extended family. And so for me, I think there was some lovely, it was affirming. Like, I got to experience a family that I would have loved to have had as a kid.
You did it. It's I get it. I feel like when I travel, I went to Cuba. I did it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
oh my God.
Yeah.
This is me. This is my history.
Mhm.
These are all the ways that I'm fucked up. I did it. That is. I get it. Yeah. How
Yeah.
about you?
I think it was harder, maybe a little harder for me than it might have been for Bevin. Again, mostly because Bevin has a bunch of siblings, but they don't live close. And I actually don't think any of our pod crew had other like very close family, very physically close, except for Maggie's mom. But again, it was really hard to prioritize literally and physically the pod over like my actual
Mhm.
family. And
So
that's
was there learning in that?
no, there was no learning in that. But it was, I guess the learning, there was no, it wasn't like, oh, and we've all learned a great lesson about XYZ. It wasn't that stated or that
Mhm.
explicit. I think it made me realize, like Bevin, that it's really important to have a loving community that's close. And it also, to be honest, gave me a lot more of an appreciation for my sister, who I missed a lot, and my nephews and my brother-in-law, who I missed a lot. And I wouldn't make any other decision than the ones that we made, but that was a real challenge. And I also wasn't great at communicating. I was like, I think that
Internally or externally?
to my sister.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like I wasn't like, Sarah, I'm gonna pot up with this group of friends and I'm really sorry. I know that you're probably like feeling alone and that I'm not with you right now. I avoided that conversation. But I think that since the restrictions have come down, she's also a nurse, so she was to some degree understanding because she was like in the thick of the healthcare crisis itself. But I don't know, I just feel like my relationship with my sister after the crisis per se ended is better now. And that's mostly because I realized how central that relationship is, and my relationship with my nephews and my brother-in-law and my kids' relationships with especially their cousins is really important. And so luckily that relationship has actually only gotten stronger since COVID. And maybe the absence makes the heart grow stronger. So maybe that paradoxically made the relationship stronger. So that was a challenge for me. And yeah, it was like I felt lucky. I still feel lucky. I also felt very much like I was repressing a lot in the moment. Like I was fears mostly. And just anxiety. It's just it was a time of high anxiety. And
Do you have a baseline of fairly high anxiety?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I do. Why are you laughing?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. And I think I keep it on the surface.
Yeah.
I it's always right there.
Mm.
And I do that on purpose. And so I don't have to feel that there's something in the corner that I can't see. I know that it's right in front of my face.
How'd you eat?
We shared a ton of meals. We had Taco Tuesday, which Ivy called Taco Tuesday night on the regular. We probably shared, I don't know, 2 to 3 meals a week.
Yeah.
Get together in different combinations of one another. We importantly, we hired a childcare
Oh
provider.
yeah. Was that started in September? Because that was when school started again.
Yep. And we hired her to be with the kids.
So how did you integrate her into the pod?
We figured out her situation, explained our parameters, and she was able to agree to that. And
To the best of her knowledge.
I mean, yeah. I think she didn't have much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was fine. Yeah. Yeah. We all interviewed her all together. Yep.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must have been a
That's
little.
right.
I now have one URL for all things health hats. That's linktree/health hats, spelled linktr.ee/health hats, one word, to subscribe for free or with a contribution through Patreon. You can access show notes, search the 600 plus episode archive, and link to my social media channels. Your engagement by listening, sharing, and commenting makes quite an impact. Please visit linktree/health hats. Thank you. Intimidating.
Well, I think there's more to the story here, which is that the summer was actually excellent. I remember that summer being really good because beautiful weather, we can be outside, you can be socially distanced and still have a great time. Like we went to Vermont that summer in a house that we still rent.
That was awesome.
And
that was the first trip. We've done it every year.
We've done it every year since.
All of us went to Vermont.
And
Benny and I came to that too.
They did. That is correct.
Swatted with us. They quarantined for a week from their pod and came to Vermont.
And I just remembered something, which is that the zones were gone from October 2020 to April 2021. So they were here all that summer.
Yeah, they were here all that. Yeah.
So
we were four.
It was 4 families. That's right.
That Vermont trip, it was July.
Right.
We took a week. We went to Vermont together, and it was one of the happiest.
Oh, it was so much fun.
It was just incredible. It was so joyous. We were so tight from having been through what we'd been through together.
Yeah.
We were so thrilled to be able to be on vacation together
In a beautiful spot.
in a beautiful spot. It was, we're going back there again this summer.
That's
We
correct.
went there last summer.
Yep. And so the summer was really wonderful. And then September happened, and that's when we got the help because all of us
Had to work.
work and the kids had school. And it was a very strange arrangement, but we made it work. So Bevin and Dave worked at their house, and their house, like I said, is five houses away from our house. And so the kids were all in our house. And I don't want to say her name on recording, but our nanny, for lack of a better way to put it, was basically responsible for running all the kids' Zooms because Jasper and Audrey were in 2nd grade. Ivy must have been kindergarten, and Edie was still in preschool.
And Ellie was in
And Ellie was in kindergarten. And so they all had their own Zooms to do. And I'm a teacher and I had to do this too. But I will say, God bless all the teachers who had to do the best they could with a really shitty situation. And our nanny her main role for most of the day was like administer the Zooms, make sure the kids could get on.
paying attention.
Yeah. And then do snacks, do lunch, etc. And we had like rotation. So I was downstairs in my basement teaching on Zoom all day. And then there would be like each of the grown-ups would take one lunch period, I think.
She would leave at 2:30.
2:30, that's right. And then
we would take turns taking all 5 of the kids
That's right.
somewhere or doing something with them from 2:30 to 5.
That's right.
And each parent would take a kid.
Yeah.
We would just rotate days. Those were cool. I remember taking them on all kinds of different little adventures after school. And there was one, I took them to Rock Meadow in Belmont. All 5 of them. It was in probably November, and it was a really cold, weird day, and the sun was just going down. It was like the sun was starting to set, and we were wandering around Rock Meadow, and this stag burst out of the bushes and just started running towards us and reared up on his hind legs and then kept running.
That's cool.
And I was standing there with these 5 kids. We were all just in awe. And I don't know. I'll never forget that kind of moment. Those kinds of unexpected adventures. There were also some like horrible slogs in those.
Yeah. Those after school moments or hours were tough.
Yeah.
They were rough. And I think that we got into the rhythm. I also will say, as the summer turned to fall and fall turned to winter, it got harder. And I had a really hard winter, And then I went back to school right after winter break. So January 3rd, I was back at school. And I felt bad on 2 levels. One was that they had one less adult to do this. So I didn't have a choice. Like my job was back in session, so I had to go. And then I felt terrible because basically just when I started to feel okay with Zoom teaching, we went back to school, and they put us in a hybrid situation where I was teaching like 4 or 5 kids in person and then the rest of the class on Zoom. And every day I went home feeling like the worst teacher in the world. Like I just couldn't do this.
My son, Ruben, had 1st graders.
Yeah.
And he said it was soul sucking.
It was soul sucking is a light way of putting it. Yeah. And I have still resentfulness and anger towards the administration of my district because their instincts were right. Let's get these kids back into school. But it was impossible. They gave us an impossible task. It was, like I said, every day I went home feeling like I was the worst teacher in the world. And everybody was feeling that way too. But there wasn't enough community at that moment where we could say, oh, I guess everybody feels this way. because none of the administration wanted to acknowledge it, because that would mean that, okay, now something's broken and we need to do something about it. But that was really incredibly hard. And that, again, the summer was wonderful, but then the winter was incredibly challenging for me.
Our kids, mine do. I think yours too. They remember those. They remember that year as
that's
the
right.
best year of their lives. They think back on it so fondly. I remember this summer we were hanging out and we were all going around the table and saying, if you could live in any decade, in any historical period, when would you live? And we all, the 60s, like the whatever, time of the dinosaurs. And my son was like, COVID times, back when we were in the pod.
Yeah.
We were homeschoolers, and there's some similarities.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just our kids. We homeschool together with some others. And so I understand. We came from the point of view where we'll be damned if we're sending our 6-year-old to a full-time job. It just didn't make any sense to us. And the kids, like you talk to Simon and Ruben, they have this is a good memory.
Mm.
That not in the time of tragedy, but so I get it. I get where they're coming from. The kids are coming.
It's also funny. So two things remind me. I'm reminded of two things. Number one, people who didn't have kids thought that COVID was like the greatest time.
Some of them, yeah.
It
My
was-
siblings who don't have kids,
They
had a great time.
like some of my colleagues who don't have kids were just like, oh my God, it was the best. Like exactly. There's so much time, all this time. And I'm like, oh man, we had no time.
We had no time.
So demoralizing. And then the second thing that made me think about is that now I'm having a mental lapse. There's two things, but I'll come back to the second one. The main thing is that, the second thing is this, that students, kids, like, because I teach high school, we have them do a reflection essay at the end of senior year. And for the last 3 years, there have been like essays about COVID times. And oh man, I'm so mad about this. All the kids like to a person, there's not a single person that says anything different. COVID was amazing. I want to go back to COVID. It was so awesome. I didn't have to go to school. I could log on and I didn't have to go because my teachers couldn't require me to put my camera on, and I could just play video games the entire day, and I did. And people in education circles were like, these kids are traumatized. These kids we need to be really gentle about talking about this because it might re-traumatize them or whatever. And not a single student that I've ever read a reflection from or heard from has said anything remotely close to trauma. They were like, that was the best. Why can't we do that again? What Jasper said. And it just makes me, I felt such a disconnect because all the adults that I was working with in my profession were like, these kids are so traumatized and we have to treat them gently and we have to make
There's
sure
a lot of self-reflection in what people think
Yeah.
about other people.
I mean, there's pretty good data that, mental health outcomes for kids. Outcomes for kids. And obviously the learning.
No, I know.
But I get your point. That just release of day-to-day responsibilities for a lot of people, I think was
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe we don't talk about that enough.
All right. So we got 10 more minutes on this.
That's
this,
good.
but I want to do intros again.
Okay.
So who are you?
My name is Dave Weintraub. I live in Watertown, Massachusetts. I have 2 daughters, Audrey, who's now 12 and was 7 at the start of the pandemic, and Edie, who's now 9, who was 4 at the start of the pandemic. And my partner is Jessica Middlebrook, and she's with the kids right now.
She's totally special.
She's very special. She's an amazing person.
I'm Bevin Croft, and I live in Watertown, and my partner is David Pereira, not to be confused with David Weintraub. And I have 2 kids, Jasper, who is 11 now, and Ivy, who is 9. And I'm a policy researcher by day. I work for a nonprofit. And we're representing this family, we call it, a family of friends that is still incredibly close. We text each other on a text chain pretty much every day.
At least 10 times. And I always feel bad I can't respond because I have terrible cell reception in my schools.
So we are part of this community that formed long before COVID, but strengthened and went to some new level of friendship during the pandemic.
Yeah, we've known each other for 20 years, and I've been friends with Maggie, who's in the pod since college, because we were in the same dorm hall in freshman year of college. And so those connections go back really far. And then another family that was not technically in the pod, Benny and Allie, like I've known Benny since I was a baby because our parents were friends. So the connections in this friend family are really deep and very special and super unique. I don't know how many people have such close, long-standing friendships that are still close.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
We're very lucky.
That's
very
right.
lucky.
Yeah.
Wow. This is great.
It is.
So, how did we meet?
We met through Benny, who
Yeah.
is in our family,
Mhm.
through work stuff, because you had just come to Children's, and you
Yes.
had previously been working in substance use, kind of behavioral health.
In Albany. Yeah, in upstate New York.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he thought we'd be interested to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And Benny, because he was friends with
Simon.
your kids.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And didn't you marry them? Didn't you marry Bevin and Dave?
I did.
And he married Benny and Allie.
Oh, and you married Benny.
Yeah.
So you've married 2 of the families in our family.
That's right.
What
Yep.
an honor. I loved that the kids thought that COVID time was best. And it wasn't a period of anxiety for them. So Bevin and David's story reinforces for me that governance is never-ending work, whether it's a pod or a nation. Leaders and participants change, culture morphs, communication improves or degrades, and power dynamics shift. Now, I pick and choose what governance to participate in because it's a lot of work. In my family, my wife participates in town governance through her activities in climate justice. I'm involved in the governance of my family, PCORI, and several committees and teams. When governance of an organization or a team is poor, I don't want to spend more than 25% of my time trying to improve bad governance. So if I find that it takes a lot to try to improve governance, I usually drop out or quit. It's not worth it. I've done that several times in my career, but it isn't worth it. Trust is key. It's the currency. The currency of governance is trust. Negotiation and transparency are part of governance, and they depend on trust. These days, I'm fascinated by governance of research, which you've heard me talk about, and governance in AI, which I've only just begun to talk about. So, more to come. Fascinating. I host, write, and produce Health Hats the podcast with assistance from Kayla Nelson